Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Now we will have a story about how not everything in life goes our way, but only you have the power to correct the situation or take revenge on those who have wronged you. I worked in a hospital as a surgeon. Being a doctor has been part of our family for generations. My father was the chief surgeon at the same hospital where I worked. During my few years of experience, I gained a lot of experience, and I also had a natural talent for it. Sometimes it was as if I had a sense of what needed to be done, but I also learned a lot from my father. When it was time for surgery, he always took me with him, but when the cases were too complicated, he performed the surgery himself. But everything is never perfect. More precisely, my father had a flaw that could interfere with his work. He really liked to drink. Although so far he had been in control, indulging in alcohol only at home and only after work so he could be in shape for the next shift, I was worried, knowing how unpredictable alcohol addiction was. One day I came home from my shift, my father was already home. He was sitting in a big leather armchair in the living room and he had a whiskey glass in his hand from which he sipped his liquor. "How was the shift?" he asked. It had been relatively quiet today. Didn't even have to operate on anybody. "I'm glad. Yesterday I had a difficult case." "Yes, you know it yourself." "Yes, I know the patient died, but that's no reason to drink. Dad, I'm worried about you." He got up, went over to the bar, and poured whiskey into an almost empty glass. "Son, you know why I remain so calm when these things happen. It's not the first time a patient has never risen from my operating table. I always let them go and don't hold them. Otherwise, I would go crazy. That's why I'm such a good surgeon and everyone respects me. But you're drinking and that could end badly. I told you I'm in control. Have you ever seen me drunk in the OR? But when your patient didn't make it through surgery a month ago, you never recovered from the loss. I can see that you're afraid of making a mistake every time. Although even then it wasn't your fault, he just had very serious injuries." I didn't say anything back to him. I knew he was right in a way. But I was really worried about him. He had been into alcohol for a few years now, and maybe he was really in control of it. So I just left him alone with the glass. Days and weeks went by, our work continued, and one day I noticed something I had feared. I came into the cafeteria to eat at lunchtime, and my father was already sitting alone at the far table. In addition to a plate of salad, there was a glass of juice on the table. While I was standing in line, I noticed him taking a small flask out of his pocket and pouring some clear liquid into his juice. I realized it was alcohol, and I realized that my fears were now coming true. Finally, waiting for my lunch portion, I took my plate and went to the table where my father was sitting. "May I sit down?" I started. He pointed to an empty chair across from him, indicating his agreement. I put down my plate and sat down. We were both silent for a while, chewing our food. But when my father reached for his glass, I couldn't stand it. "How can you? Don't you get it?" He stared at me as if I had said something unthinkable. "Stop it." I grabbed his hand where he was holding the glass. "How can you drink on the job? Are you out of your mind? Who are you to tell me what to do? It's my second shift here, I had to stay. A little whiskey wouldn't hurt me." We stared into each other's eyes for a few seconds, exchanging stern thoughts. I didn't want to cause a scandal here in front of everyone, but I couldn't have him walking around the hospital drunk either. "Just go home. I'll be here. I'll be here if need me. Please, just go home." I let go of his hand. My father took a few sips from it, glancing at me. I knew that if the head doctor found out about this, my father's reputation would be destroyed and he would simply be suspended from his job. I didn't want that. After all, he was my father. I took my plate and moved to another table but continued to watch him. He finished his portion and left. I soon found out that he had heeded my advice and went home. I was relieved. "Dr. Corrigan, you're needed in the OR. We have a patient coming in from a car accident. She's in pretty bad shape." A nurse came running up to me, interrupting my musings. I ran to the operating room just in time to catch up with the gurney with the wounded girl. She already had time to put on a mask, injected medication. On the move, I examined and gave a few instructions to the orderlies and ran to quickly prepare myself for the operation. The operation was difficult and lengthy. For several hours, which seemed endless, I conjured over the victim. She had many fractures in her spine in addition to all the other wounds. I managed to save her life, but since the injuries were very serious, I knew that the girl could remain confined to a wheelchair forever. When I arrived in the room, when I was notified that she had already regained consciousness, I sat down beside her to examine her. After palpating her pulse, I made sure that her heart was working normally in her condition. "Doctor, what's wrong with me?" "You were in an accident, but it's all over now. We operated on you. Don't worry." The girl sighed a sigh of relief at first, then her tired look turned anxious. She stared at me, hoping to hear something comforting. "Doctor, I can't feel my legs. What's wrong with me?" "Olivia, I have to be honest with you." I lowered my eyes for a few seconds, then looked at her again. "You had very serious injuries. We did everything we could, but there's a risk that the lower half of your body won't function." "How? What am I going to do? How am I going to live? Why did you save me if I can't walk?" It was like she was blaming me for what happened. "Olivia, there's a small chance that you'll recover, but you still have to accept reality." I felt truly sorry for the girl. She just cried. I took her hand to support her in her grief. For several days, I visited her, continuing the treatment. One day, when I had finished my examination and was about to leave, she took my hand and stopped me. "Doctor, I think I can move my fingers." She tried to squeeze out a smile of hope. This phrase of hers made me happy, as if it concerned me personally. I went to her feet and made a few manipulations that allowed me to make sure that the sensitivity was indeed there. I saw her trying to wiggle her right big toe, then her left, and then she tried wiggling her foot, but so far she was finding it difficult. I signed her up for therapy where she was able to recover little by little. After a few months of taking the necessary medication and exercise, she was able to walk independently, although she was still very weak. I was personally involved in her treatment. In the time we spent together, we became very close and grew fond of each other. A few months passed and she fully recovered. We were soon married. My father, of course, did not very much approve of my attachment to my patient, but those were my feelings in my life. Whenever he tried to tell me something negative about her, I would come back to the subject of his alcohol addiction, and we often argued, but eventually he had to come to terms with it. For several years, Olivia and I lived in a happy marriage. I moved away from my parents and my wife, and I settled in a different neighborhood. I continued to work at the hospital, trying to have less contact with my father. Still, sometimes we had to do surgeries together. One day, when I was sitting in the resident's room, a nurse called me, saying that I had to report to the operating room. "But my father is there now. He's an excellent surgeon, and he said he could handle the surgery himself." "Please, doctor, let's just go." She was so begging with her eyes for me to follow her. When I got there, I was in the middle of surgery. The patient was bleeding and they were trying to save her. As I walked over to the table and stood next to my father, I smelled alcohol on him. Without wasting time reading morals, I began to save the patient, but since my father hit her artery and she had already lost a lot of blood, even long efforts could not help us save her. She died on the operating table. I pronounced the time of death and left the operating room. Already in the resident's room, when my father came in after me, I couldn't stand it. "Everybody out. We need to talk," I said to the two nurses who were in the room. They left. I stared at my father, who sat down on the couch and covered his face with his hand. "How could you? You went into surgery drunk. What kind of man are you?" "I know my limit. The amount I drank had no effect on the surgery. She just had a lot of internal injuries." "You think I didn't notice your hands were shaking? You just killed her. You're an addict. When are you gonna admit that? You need therapy." "I don't need anything." He stormed off the couch and took a step toward me, his facial features showing his aggressive mood. "You know I can't leave it at that. Son, don't forget that you're the main coordinator and you're in charge of the whole process. If I get fired, so do you. So I suggest you think twice before you make any decisions." He left the resident's office and I was alone, wondering what the right thing to do was. I got home late. Olivia was still awake. She was sitting on the couch waiting for me. "Hello, darling. How are you? I'm sorry I'm late tonight. We were supposed to go to the restaurant. Do you remember?" Honestly, I've forgotten all about it. The incident with my father at the hospital made me forget everything. "I'm sorry, I have a lot of work to do. Actually, there was something I wanted to tell you at dinner." "Olivia, Well, I'm sorry. I've been working really hard. Yeah, I know I haven't been home much lately, but I promise I'll try to make it up to you. I'll transfer so I can spend more time with you. You don't have to, Stephen. I'm leaving you. That phrase ripped the ground out from under me. It was as if a black fog had enveloped me because nothing seemed to suggest such a situation. But why? Olivia, we were so happy. I love you. I'm leaving. I've got someone else. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She got up and left the house. I wanted to catch up with her, but I knew there was no point. She had always been the kind of person who, if she made decisions, it was impossible to change her mind. It really hurt me to let her go. And I didn't give up my plan to move to another job and try to get her back. Although, if she was already seeing someone, it wasn't the first time. And that means she's been cheating on me for a long time. Thoughts got all mixed up in my head. I went to my bedroom, hoping that in the morning the right decision would come to me. The next day I went to work as it was necessary. There was no way I could skip my shifts. I was a doctor and I needed to treat sick people. During a break in the cafeteria, I noticed my father having a pleasant conversation with someone. I knew from his facial expression and conversation that he was not talking to his mother or his friends. I realized that he was having a mistress. When he was finished, I went over to him. Did you talk to your mother on the phone? No. Why? Then who were you talking to so nicely? None of your business, son. You spend too much time on my personal life. You'd be better off with your own. He turned and walked away. I didn't have any more arguments at this point. Realizing that he was ruining not only his career, but also his family life, I decided to test my hunches. After all, it was quite possible that after Olivia left me, I was just imagining things. I waited for my father to leave for surgery. Since cell phones weren't allowed in the operating room, he left it in his desk drawer. I went over to the table and yanked on the drawer handle, but it was locked. I searched his desk for paper clips, and after a few efforts, I was able to open the drawer. Pulling out my phone, I began scrolling through my call history. Finding the time that his mysterious call had taken place, I saw a familiar number. It was Olivia's number. I realized they were lovers. All the puzzles were coming together now, but there was no way I had expected such a betrayal from either my father or Olivia. I waited until he came back and told him honestly that I knew everything. How do you go through my things? He started accusing me furiously. That's not the point now. You betrayed me and your mother too. Does she even know you have a mistress? I told you, my personal life is none of your business. Yes, it is. She's my mother, and I won't let her get hurt. You're just an alcoholic who doesn't know what he wants. I walked out, leaving him alone. I wanted to call Olivia and tell her everything, to tell her that I knew who she was with and I wanted to hear from her why. Why him? But she didn't pick up the phone. I felt very angry with her and with my father at that moment. The husband of the deceased patient sued the hospital. I was called as a witness. When I testified, my father was also present. He looked at me, indicating with a look that I needed to confirm what had happened as death by multiple injuries. I crumpled for a long time. I knew that if I told the truth, my father could be fired and go to jail. But a picture floated before my eyes of Olivia telling me she was leaving and how I knew she was leaving for my father. Even though I was a doctor and it was my job to not hurt people, still the hurt and the sense of revenge overpowered me, and I told it like it really was. I even gave the name of a nurse who could confirm my words. As a result of the investigation, my father was permanently disbarred from practicing medicine. The deceased's husband had long insisted that he be deprived of his liberty as well, which his lawyer got. I resigned from that hospital where everything reminded me of my father and Olivia. I bought a house in a new city. I persuaded my mother to move with me, but she wished to stay in the house she had spent many years in. She said she knew of my father's sins, but she still loved him and wished to wait for him home. The betrayal of Olivia, to whom I had given my best feelings, I could not forget. After hiring a man, I learned that she had become attached to a rich man and they were getting married soon. I realized that her goals had always been self-serving, so I asked this little man, who was a bandit, to bring her back to her former condition. I paid him well to have her robbed and beaten. Then she was severely beaten with a stick several times on her spine, damaging it again. And I soon found out that although she had undergone another operation, she now had to use a wheelchair at all times. What do you think of this story? Is the main character right or wrong? We're waiting for your thoughts. And now let's move on to the next case in which a woman, after 23 years of marriage, decided to betray her husband cruelly, but it ended in retribution. When I first saw Jessica at school, she instantly won my heart with her beauty and charm. She had long, thick hair the color of dark chocolate that fell over her shoulders in soft waves. Her eyes were a deep ocean hue, full of passion and vivacity. She always smiled, and her smile delighted everyone around. I was a modest guy, and it always seemed to me that she was unattainable for me. However, my feelings for her only grew stronger every day. The whole class knew that Jessica was courted by a lot of guys. She was surrounded by attention and always in the company of gentlemen. It seemed to me that I would never be able to attract her attention and become more than just a friend to her. But at our graduation party, everything changed. Jessica had a fight with her boyfriend, and he started insulting her in front of everyone. Seeing how she suffered, I could not help myself and decided to stand up for her. Stop. There is no need to insult her. Respect her as she deserves, I said angrily, defending Jessica. And here is the most harmless Michael. What can you do? Do you think you can be with her? Look at you, Jessica's boyfriend said with a sneer. I don't count on it. But I can't see how boorish you are with her. I can protect her from you. And I can show her that she deserves better, I said boldly, even though my heart nearly jumped out of my chest. You will now regret what you said. I'll teach you life now. Jessica's boyfriend spoke angrily and approached me. Jessica clutched at her boyfriend's hand. She tearfully begged him not to touch me. But this bastard pushed Jessica away. She fell. Then he came up to me and waved his hand. But I managed to dodge and aptly hit the face of this bastard with my fist. The hit was surprisingly good. The bastard fell to the ground, writhing in pain. Well, what did you want to tell me? Can you add more? I became even more emboldened when I felt victory. The bastard writhed on the ground under the mockery of the crowd around us, covering his face with his hands, and asked me not to touch him. Jessica was visibly shocked, but at the same time grateful that I stood up for her. Thank you, Michael. I didn't expect you to be my protector, Jessica said with gratitude in her eyes. Jessica, you deserve to be with someone who appreciates and respects you. I have always been there, watching you from afar, but I never found the courage to confess my feelings. Michael, I never noticed the way I look at you. You have always been there, and I am grateful that you have become my protector today. Let's take a walk, chat, and drink coffee together. We left the party together, realizing that our acquaintance was moving to a new level. During our walk, we talked about our dreams, what is valuable in a relationship, and what we wish for each other. The weather favored our romantic walk. It was very quiet and warm, the lanterns unconstrainedly flooding the surrounding trees with yellow light. Jessica began to smile again. She was even more beautiful in the moonlight. This is how our story began. We became inseparable, supporting each other in all our endeavors. A few years later, we got married. And it's been more than 23 years since Jessica and I got married. She was my first love, and I still have the most tender feelings. Jessica was not only beautiful, but also a wonderful wife. Her warmth, care, and understanding made my life full and happy. I have been fortunate to achieve significant success in my career. I became a successful lawyer specializing in corporate law. My work has allowed me to become one of the leading lawyers in our huge city. I was a member of one of the prestigious law firms where I advised major companies and corporations on legal and dispute matters. My skills and knowledge have earned me a reputation as a successful and experienced lawyer. I often worked on complex transactions and disputes, and my expertise brought real results for my clients, for which I received a very decent income. Thanks to my professional success, I was able to provide Jessica with everything she needed. Our house was chic, with huge space in one of the most prestigious areas of the city. We created our own happy nest there, where we could enjoy comfort and tranquility. While I spent a lot of time working, Jessica was at home and took care of our home comfort. She was a smart, beautiful, and amazing wife, and I always felt proud to see her next to me. Although she did not work officially, she found her calling in volunteer work and participation in charitable organizations. But she didn't do anything serious. Jessica and I always tried to find time for walks and meetings together to enjoy each other and city life. We traveled, discovering new places and cultures, and each of our adventures made us even stronger and closer to each other. Everything was fine, but one day Jessica's strange behavior began to disturb me lately. She began to leave the house unannounced and answered hesitantly when I asked what was going on. I began to suspect that something was wrong, but she claimed that everything was fine. She just needed more time for herself and more personal space. I tried to put up with it, hoping that soon everything would be the same again. One day, Jessica left her phone on the coffee table in front of me and went into another room. Suddenly, an incoming message appeared on the screen. See you today? I won't have time to meet again. It's either today or never. I silently passed the phone to Jessica, pretending not to see the message. She hurriedly got ready and said she was going to visit her friend for a little while. I didn't believe her excuses and decided to follow her. She entered the hotel and I continued to follow her to the room. I approached the room where Jessica had entered. Rage and anger filled me all over. I could not stand the tension and with all my strength broke down the door, bursting into the room where I saw a frightened man and Jessica. In a rage, I began to make a scandal, not wanting to listen to explanations. "What are you doing here? What does all this mean?" I shouted, barely able to contain my anger. "Michael, please calm down. This man, he's a numismatist. I was just picking out an antique coin for you for your dad's birthday present. You know how he loves collecting coins and I wanted to make a special gift. I didn't know you were following me and it all looks so weird. You would never find time to find something worthwhile, so I decided to take the initiative in my own hands, decided not to tell you about it so that you would not start asking a lot of questions and make me take my time. And this man has to leave early tomorrow morning. Here I am in a hurry." Jessica, looking frightened and confused, began to tell everything. My emotions suddenly changed to embarrassment and regret. I realized that I had let my suspicions get the better of me and break our bond of trust. My eyes dropped and I took a deep breath, realizing my mistake. "Jessica, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have reacted like that. I let my suspicions get the better of me without giving you a chance to explain yourself. I'm sorry I put you under so much stress. Please forgive me." Jessica looked at me with mixed feelings on her face, offended but also understanding. She nodded slowly, wiping the tears from her face. "Michael, I forgive you because I know that our feelings for each other are real. But please give both of us more trust and space for ourselves. We need to communicate and listen to each other to keep our marriage strong." We hugged and I felt the joy returning to our family. This incident was a lesson for us and a reminder of the importance of trust and communication in a relationship. Everything seemed to be just coming back to normal. I already put my thoughts in order. But then something happened again that I was so afraid of before. I got a call from Simon, my colleague. He said that he saw Jessica with Brian at a nightclub. When I found out about this, I was overcome by an unpleasant feeling of anxiety. I knew there was definitely something wrong and my suspicion only grew stronger. I asked Simon to describe to me what he saw. "Michael, I met Jessica and Brian at the club. I was sitting on the second floor in the VIP area. You know I like noisy places to hang out, but I love to watch. So I spotted this couple. They danced very close and passionately, not like two simple friends spending time together. Plus that nasty Brian, I didn't know you guys were friends. I immediately sensed that something was wrong here," Simon said with a serious voice. I listened to Simon and my heart contracted with a hot wave of jealousy. "Are you serious? Are you sure about this?" I asked with concern in my voice. 100%. It certainly was them. But me and Jessica did not communicate with Brian. I myself cannot stomach this type. You certainly surprised me greatly, Simon. Yes, I myself was very surprised. I myself did not believe my eyes at first because I had never seen Jessica in such a guise. That's why I decided to tell you what I saw. And you already figured it out. This information completely destroyed all my hopes for a happy future with Jessica. I wasn't going to let this situation slip away from me without an answer, and I decided to follow Jessica to find out the truth. It was a good time to test Jessica. Jessica was going to the sauna, but she was going to go with her girlfriends, no men, of course. With this, she justified the reason why I could not go with her. I calmly let go of Jessica and I immediately began to follow her as soon as she left the house. Jessica called a taxi. I quickly ran to my car and followed them. We really drove up to a country recreation complex. But here I didn't see any of Jessica's girlfriends. But I saw, sitting in my car, how Brian met Jessica near the sauna and led her inside. My heart beat faster when I realized that it was only the two of them inside the room. I decided to take a chance and sneak closer to the sauna to hear their conversation. When I got close enough, I could hear their voices. "Jessica, do you know that this Michael is completely obsessed with you? He's so jealous, but he doesn't understand anything, you stupid bastard. Brian said with a smile, sitting on the bench. Yes, I noticed his jealousy, but I didn't think he would react so stupidly to all this. I even had to deliberately lead him on a false trail with the stupid coin so that he would feel guilty and stop expressing his suspicions to me. He is completely blinded by his feelings, stupid fool. But you taught him well, I liked it. Michael will never understand what we are doing and I enjoy this game. To be honest, I even like a little how he suffers from jealousy. It gives me a sense of power over him, Jessica said smugly. And you know, this sauna is mine. I built it in this recreation complex. I knew that we could spend an unforgettable time here, Brian boasted. Wow, I didn't know you were so powerful and rich. Perhaps Michael has something to think about, Jessica replied playfully. Yes, he will never be able to offer you such luxury and attention as I do. It's just too limited and boring for you. You're right, Brian. He is always too busy with his work and legal affairs. I deserve more in life. Listening to their dialogue, I felt a mixture of rage and resentment, but I realized that my jealousy cannot determine my actions. I did not want to humiliate myself and show them my weakness. So, with all my composure, I quietly left, not wanting to see them continue their intimate relationship. When I left the recreation complex, my condition was mixed. I experienced disappointment, bitterness, and anger, but their presence did not overwhelm me. I realized that it was necessary to act in order to find justice and protect myself. I've decided to use my legal connections and resources to uncover violations at Brian's vacation complex. It was a muddy bastard, there must have been something unclean here. I have done extensive research and collected evidence that his complex was built in violation of laws and regulations. Apparently, Brian just gave someone a bribe, but this will definitely not help him now. In the process of research, I discovered that Brian not only disregarded building codes and permits, but was also involved in financial fraud and money laundering. I collected evidence that could put him behind bars. Finally, it's time for my revenge. I decided to take Jessica hunting with me, promising her an exciting adventure. I brought her to a remote location. Here, Jessica, here our hunt will begin. I told Jessica. It's so interesting. Who are we going to hunt? Jessica asked curiously. Oh, sorry, I didn't tell you. Now you will understand everything, I said and brought out a bound man with a bag on his head. Michael, who is this? Jessica asked anxiously. Now you know, I said and removed the bag from Brian's head. I've had some serious connections with some very serious people. I was assigned a couple of guys to help me who brought Brian to this place. I know all about you, about your entertainment in the sauna and not only. I spoke loudly. Michael, let me explain everything, Jessica said with concern and tears in her eyes. No, creature, I've had enough of your explanations. I heard everything when you confided in him in the sauna. You assholes will answer me for this. Michael, stop, let's decide everything peacefully, let's talk. Trembling with fear, Brian tried to reason with me. Enough whining for me. Get naked. But Michael, why? What are you thinking? Jessica asked in a frightened, trembling voice. Shut your mouth and undress. You weren't shy about flashing your bare ass in front of Brian before. Quickly, I said. I ordered loudly and fired a gun into the air. These assholes quickly undressed and stood in front of me in horror. Now, creatures, run. And the sooner the better, maybe I won't kill you. I shouted and once again shot into the air. These creatures ran in terror with all their might. They fell and got up. I followed them with shots. I didn't want to kill them, but I just had to scare those bastards well. So I shot in the air, but they thought I was shooting at them. My eyes sparkled with malice as I chased after them. I drove them to the very edge of the forest. They ran out into the suburbs, which was not far from the forest, terrifying those around them with their screams and bare asses. I laughed heartily and got back in the car. But I haven't finished my revenge. I turned over all the evidence about Brian to the police and got the bastard put in jail for his illegal activities. And I divorced this two-faced bitch, leaving her in poverty. Thus, I got the upper hand in this situation, but disappointment and sadness still smoldered in my heart. I realized that Jessica, whom I loved so much, turned out to be a traitor, and Brian was just a tool in her game. But I was determined I will not allow this deceit and betrayal to determine my life. I promised myself that I would get through this and find the strength to move on, no matter the pain they caused me. And I began to open new horizons in my life. Dear viewers, write how you like these stories and see our other videos. Until new meetings.